I guess we'll start with what brought you here.
Well, I've been a fan of Turner Classic Movies because they do a great service showing older films. And I went to their first film festival, I guess it was last year. I introduced a few films for them. And I've done the essentials for them once or twice. I did a whole year of essentials. So I've done a few things for TCM. They consider me part of the family. I like them. They like me. They asked me if I'd do this. I said, sure.
Well, I think it's interesting because the way that the channel operates is almost kind of what you were doing at the start of your career, which is exposing people to underseen films and directors.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you think that it kind of conveys this sense of the auteur theory?
The auteur theory is much misunderstood.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a theory. The French called it la politique des auteurs. It was a political statement. They said the old movies are shit and the new movies are good.
Cinéma du papa?
Cinéma de papa is shit. But the main thing that they were good at was in discovering the personality of various directors who worked at the height of the studio system. So people like Hitchcock and Hawks, who were thought to be just entertainers, were considered to be artists by the French when they saw that they were very personal filmmakers and they brought their personality and their personal obsessions to their work. So it was finding the personal touch in the studio system, which was what they were doing.
When you wrote your monographs for MoMA, those early ones about Hitchcock,
Wells, Hawks, and
yeah.
Hitchcock.
And I guess Lang was later.
No, Lang, yeah, that was a book.
Yeah. Were those kind of radical in the way that they were all about one author, or was that something that came, like one filmmaker?
They were radical in the sense that they were the first retrospectives in the United States of all three of those directors.
Yeah.
Hitchcock was in his 60s, and so was Hawks, and they'd never had a retrospective in the United States. So it was unusual for that matter. And Wells had never had a retrospective either. So it was the first of its kind, and it was in New York, so it had an impact.
And what was the relationship with Andrew Sarris around that time?
Well, Andy and I were friends. We hung out in the end of the 50s, early 60s. He and Eugene Archer, who was the third or fourth string critic for the New York Times, who was the secret auteurist, a secret auteurist. We used to hang out and talk about movies into the wee hours.
Yeah. Well, I guess what always interests me is someone who's very deeply passionate about cinema. I wouldn't say a critic, but someone that watched a lot of films.
Yeah.
When you start making films, and especially when you've made a fair amount, do you start to consider your own work in that? Do you have that detached where you can maybe look at recurring
Oh, I see what you mean. No, I don't do that.
Yeah?
I try not to. I try to avoid that sort of speculation because I don't want to become self-conscious. Oh, this is one of my obsessions.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Well, I was expecting.
I purposely don't think that way.
Yeah.
With my own stuff.
Well, I guess what that leads me to is the thought of how people in receiving your films have often kind of wanted to push a certain type to each one, like, oh, this is a musical in the vein of.
Yeah, so the standard Bogdanovich review was, this is his homage to this,
Blank, yeah.
this is his homage to that. Paper Moon was supposed to be my homage to Shirley Temple. It's the anti-Shirley Temple movie. It's absolutely the contrary of Shirley Temple. So anything but Shirley Temple, certainly that wasn't the thing. But they say, you know, that long shot, that's his homage to Ford. Well, Ford was great at long shots, it's true, but he didn't invent it.
Yeah.
Griffith was pretty good at long shots too. The idea is that I learned the grammar and vocabulary of movies from looking at a lot of them,
Yeah.
and from talking to some of the best directors around. I think What's Up Doc was stolen from Bringing Up Baby. It wasn't an homage. We stole the basic plot. I told that to Hawks. I said, I'm stealing some stuff from Bringing Up Baby. He said, that's all right. Because he always used to tell me he'd steal everything. So I'm stealing from you. All right, that's fine. So I sent him the script. He called me up. Well, you didn't steal the dinosaur. Well, I can't steal the dinosaur, Howard. It's too much identified with Bringing Up Baby. No, I guess not. Well, you didn't steal the leopard. I couldn't steal the leopard, Howard. I mean, I guess not. Well, who have you got in it? Well, Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal. I mean, I know they're not Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. You're damn right they're not. Well, don't let them be cute. Okay, Howard. All right, boy. Don't let him be cute. He was very proud of the fact that that picture was a hit. Bringing Up Baby wasn't a successful picture in its day.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it wasn't. It performed well in some markets and not well in other markets. It was very spotty. But I told everybody that I had ripped off Bringing Up Baby, so Howard was thrilled that it was a hit because he could take a few bows for it.
Yeah.
He went down to Rio for some kind of tribute, and he took pictures with his own camera of the marquee of the various theaters that had What's Up Doc was playing. It's
Yeah.
very, very sweet of him.
Well, it's almost like a running theme with the filmmakers you wrote more on or interviewed more, is that there was kind of a lack of reception for what would later become, especially their great films.
Yeah. Well, that's true. You know, you look at a year like 1959, which had Rio Bravo, Anatomy of a Murder, North by Northwest, and they gave the Oscar to Ben-Hur, one of the worst movies ever made. I wrote a review of Ben-Hur. My review ran like this: the chariot race starts at, and I listed the start and time of the chariot race. That was my whole review. It wasn't very nice.
There was a similar reaction to Lawrence of Arabia, I guess, too. I remember reading the review you gave and Andrew Sayers gave. Back then there would be like the kind of designation of fair, good, etc.
Oh yes, yeah. I didn't like Lawrence of Arabia. First of all, I didn't even know at the time that it was deeply inaccurate.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I just didn't like the picture. I thought it was boring and long and boring. And it irritated me. I saw it with a big audience. And that shot of Omar in the distance, the famous shot, big deal, shot, done, everybody applauded. And I thought, if you applaud a shot, you're not in it.
Yeah.
And the real story is much more interesting than the movie. Peter O'Toole was great, however. I love him.
I've noticed that as your films, as you made more and more films, there's always a strong sense of craftsmanship, but it's not like an insistent style. It kind of like that shot you say, like takes someone out of it because they notice it's a shot. Is that a conscious effort?
Well, I'm trying to tell a story, not make a great shot, you know. I don't think audiences should be aware of technique or how you do it. It's like taking them backstage of a magic act. It's nobody's business how it's done, you know. No, I don't like to show off kind of technique. No, I've avoided that as much as possible.
Their film is filled with beautiful compositions, though, and I find people often remark upon Paper Moon or Last Picture Show, but I think especially films like St. Jack or Texasville have a great camera work, and I'm wondering what your relationship has been with different cinematographers over the year, like Robbie Mueller or...
Well, I pretty much call the shot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say where I want the camera, and usually will indicate the lens.
Yeah.
Once I learned about lenses, which took me a while, but I got some very good tips from Orson about lenses, and Hitchcock as well. So I usually say where the camera's going to go, what the camera's going to do, and so on. And then, of course, I leave the lighting up to the camera director of photography. But I mean, I say what kind of mood I want, and he does it. I don't know about lighting except that if I don't like it. So my relationship with directors of photography is very close. We work closely. Here's what I'd like. Here's what I'd like to do. What do you think? So on. It's not like I'm dictatorial,
Yeah.
but I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do. And as far as composition is concerned, you know, I grew up with, my father was a painter, and we didn't have a lot of money, so his studio was at the apartment.
Yeah.
So I mean, I grew up with compositions from the moment I opened my eyes. So I just always was thinking in those terms, I suppose. When I look through the lens, I look through the lens to pick the shot and find the shot and so on. You know, I've been fortunate to have some very good cameramen. I did about 5 or 6 pictures with Laszlo Kovacs. He was good. He was great. Great fun to work with. And 2 with Robbie Mueller, who was brilliant.
Those are great.
Yeah, St. Jack, and they all laughed. And then I had a very, very fine Italian cameraman, Alberto Spagnoli, who died very young. He did Daisy Miller with me. He was amazing. Everything sharp, you know, Alberto. Everything sharp. Si, sharp, everything. Tutto, you see. And I knew it was not possible that it would be all sharp. But then I saw the dailies it was. I said, how did you do that? He said,
I mean, you're here for the last picture show, but Texasville, to my mind, is just an incredible work.
well, thank you. Did you see the director's cut of that?
No, I haven't. I've seen the scenes separate, like outside of.
Yeah,
the
on
actual-
YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to get MGM to put out, they're not in a very good financial situation in Texasville. The sad thing about Texasville was that it was a very risky proposition to do it. I didn't really want to do it because I thought picture show was such a big deal and it was so highly thought of, and it was about coming of age and about kids and so on, and it was sort of funny and sad at the same time, so tragic and comic. Texasville was about middle-aged angst, which by its nature is funny. It's not really funny when you're going through it, but it's funny to photograph. So it wasn't, you know, when people say it's a sequel or a remake, well, sequel, they basically want you to make the same film over again with a slightly different plot or something. But this was a completely different movie. At that point, when the picture was about to open, there was no home video of the last picture show. You couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So I had made a deal with the guy who was the head of Columbia at that time to do a director's cut of picture show and bring that out in theaters ahead of Texasville. And so we made the picture with the assumption that picture show would be shown in theaters before Texasville came out or at the same time. So, well, then there was a change of management, and the guy who came in, who shall be nameless, I wish he were nameless, but he was an absolute monster. And he didn't like me for a variety of reasons, some justified, and others not. But he just said, you can't do that. We're not going to show picture show. He says, that's cheating. Cheating. That's a stupid remark. But because of that, I had to cut large sections of Texasville out because they wouldn't make sense unless you'd seen picture show recently. So unfortunately, 25 minutes was cut out. It was a much better film at the full length.
Yeah.
There are people who like the film even in the shorter version. I don't like it as much.
I think it might have been Jonathan Rosenbaum that gave it a really good review that remarked upon how it's interesting that people are looking for a kind of nostalgia in the film that's not there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the issue, and that kind of plays out in the story, of course, with JC being part of the past and Carlo wanting to know about the past and JC wanting to know about what's happening currently.
Yeah.
But the comment Jonathan made was that these films, even when they're about something in the past, still seem to say so much about the present. And I think that applies equally to St. Jack and even The Thing Called Love. They're films that all, to some extent, are 1 foot in the past and one definitely in the present.
Well, that's me. 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the present. I'm doing a book right now based on a diary I kept from 1965, middle of 65 to the middle of 71, which is right the period where I started to make films. So it's an interesting diary, and I'm commenting on it as I go along from a contemporary viewpoint.
Okay.
So it's interesting. It's a long book. It's just endless. I don't know. I'm just going to keep going until I finish it, and then they can cut it to shreds. But in this book, I notice that I make a point of the fact that I'm 1 foot in the old Hollywood and 1 foot in the new Hollywood. The old Hollywood was all the people I knew,
Yeah.
whether it was John Ford or Hitchcock or Cary Grant or Jimmy Stewart. It was all the old Hollywood that I was hanging out with and enjoying most. Howard Hawks. The new Hollywood didn't interest me at all, but I was part of it. I had no interest in hanging out with the new Hollywood. I didn't give a shit about any of those guys. And this diary makes it very clear because I'm talking about making a new film, 2 films, 3 films, whatever they are. And The Wild Angels arguably was the first sort of off-Hollywood counterculture movie, and I worked on it.
Yeah.
And that came out in '66. And it certainly was not the kind of film that Howard Hawks or John Ford would have made in a million years. And I was writing it and doing the second unit and so on and so forth. So I became more aware of the fact that that's the way I was living now doing the diary, doing the book, than I was at the time. Because I think when there's a big shift in history, you're not so much aware of it as when it's happening. You sort of say, oh yeah, it's normal. Because it's normal to happen. You don't question events when they're happening. I don't. Maybe I'm dense. But anyway. But films like The Thing Called Love, which I liked very much, and again, it was just not distributed, or Texasville. You mentioned another one, to St. Jack. St. Jack's a picture I like very much. Ben Gazzara and I worked very hard on that one, and it was a major experience.
I love that I've read 2 quotes about the film like related to the film, and one is Ben Gazzara saying that he wanted to make a film where all of the scenes that wouldn't be in other films made up the entire film. And the other was Howard Hawks saying there are certain scenes that the audiences want, and when they don't get them, they love it.
Yeah. No, he said there are certain scenes that an audience knows it's going to get.
Yeah, when you withhold it.
And when you don't give it to them, they're so happy. On St. Jack, Ben and I discussed it, because Ben was very much involved in the writing of it. We agreed, let's not have any scene that you would normally have in a picture. Let's just not have those scenes. So whenever we got to a scene like, well, this is a scene like you've seen this scene, let's not do it. In fact, the big last scene in the picture was a 4.5-page scene between Benny's character and mine, in which we basically discuss what the picture, we sort of give the point of the picture, which is that there is certain, you can sink to a certain level, but not lower. And there's such a thing that's called integrity, and maybe it's not worth anything, but it's worth something to him, so on and so forth. So it was the night before we're supposed to shoot this scene, we're in the hotel and we're reading the scene, and Ben says, we read the scene and Ben says, I think this is one of those scenes that we don't need, that we don't want to give them. We're explaining everything. I said, I know, it's terrible. It's a terrible scene. It was fun to act, but it was a terrible scene. So it was just too on the nose. So Ben says, well, what are we doing? We're saying fuck it, aren't we? I said, that's it. You just say fuck it and not to be the end of the picture. Okay. That was the end of the picture. I like that.
That's a great period of films in your career, but it seems like all of them, for one reason or another, had difficulties with distribution or marketing.
Yes, I've had more films destroyed, or at least their impact has been reduced to nothing because the public couldn't see them.
Yeah.
Texasville is one, but Thing Called Love, St. Jack, Noise Is Off, all of them I think could have been much more popular films if they'd been able to reach the public.
Do you think that with the DVD and the opportunity for some of them where you've been able to do director's cuts, Nickelodeon being a big one?
Yeah, that was a big one. It took me years to get that right.
Is that kind of...
It's helpful because if somebody wants to see what I had in mind, they can see it. Mask took me 20 years to get that right.
Yeah.
That was a funny story because there were 8 minutes, two sequences, the total 8 minutes that had been cut out, and all the Springsteen music. So after 20 years, I called Bruce and I said, isn't there anything we can do? You can help me with the music on this so we can get them to put out my cut? He said, tell them they can have it for nothing. So I called Ron Meyer at Universal and I said, look, I want to do this. He says, Peter, don't bring it up again. I said, we can get the music for nothing. Springsteen, 8 songs, free. Oh, all right, write me a letter. And pretty soon we had it. And then I said, well, I want to put 8 minutes back. And they said, well, we don't have any outtakes. We junked all that years ago. I said, well, I've got the 8 minutes. Where'd you get it? I said, I stole it. Stole it from you. Aren't you glad I stole it? Yes, we're glad you stole it. Good. So I gave him now what was amazing was that the 8 minutes was a positive film. It was not negative, it was the positive. 2 sequences. And they spent $150,000 restoring them, and I swear, and they put it back into the negative, and I swear if you see it, you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
They did a great job with it. I'm very happy with that. So that picture now is the way I meant it to be. And Nickelodeon's close to the way I meant it to be. At least it's in black and white, which was good.
Well, I think that's contributed to a kind of renaissance for a lot of those films, or at least a new appreciation for them.
Yes, the most amazing one is At Long Last Love. Now, you don't know about that because it just happened, but they called me, and somebody called me and said, you know, At Long Last Love is on YouTube, I think it was, in 10-minute sections.
Yeah, that sounds like YouTube.
So I looked at it and I sort of flashed through it, and it was in a hurry, and I said, where the hell did they get that scene? I cut that out. And then another scene, well, where did they get that? That's out of the picture. So I forgot about it I just thought, when did they find it? And then somebody called me and says, Netflix is streaming At Long Last Love. In, you know, the whole thing. So I looked at it. It was a version that I didn't have anything to do with, except that it was very close to the original preview cut. It was very close to the script I wrote, but I screwed up the picture in the theatrical version because I was badgered and rushed. And the version that opened in theaters, which got killed, really wasn't a good version at all, I came to understand. And then I made another version for television, and for years people would come up to me and say, why did that picture get such bad reviews? I saw it on television, it's good. Well, that's not the version that was released. I didn't know that what they were referring to wasn't that version that I had cut, but rather this one that had been cut by the 20th Century Fox editorial department. A guy there named Jim Blakely, who died a couple of years ago, was a big Cole Porter fan and loved musicals, and I'm now piecing it together. He looked at it when we first made it and said, this is a good picture. Then we slowly ruined the picture. And he said, the hell with this, and he put it back. So from about 1978 or 79, that version that he did, which I didn't see until a month or two ago, was playing all over the place. And I didn't know it. People say, it's a good movie, why did it? Well, it's a different cut. It was really a different cut. It was my preview cut. Mm-hmm. So Fox, we had a screening at Temecula, and they gave me an award down there. When you get older, they give you awards everywhere. Probably for surviving, or maybe for going to Temecula. You know. we screened it at Temecula and for 300 people, and they loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't understand. This was a picture that was loathed. So I went to Fox and I said, can we put this out on DVD? And they said yes, because we had a screening at Fox and people loved it.
Yeah.
So this is a movie that Sybil Shepherd and I really loved. And then it was so destroyed and mutilated and so hated that we sort of just didn't want to talk about it. And now it's like having a child that's been mutilated come back to you whole. It's great. And when I look at it now, I say, how the hell did we do this picture? There's a guy named Joe Baltake who has a blog on the internet. He has a very long, like 8 or 9, 20-page blog on At Long Last Love. He says there are 8 versions. I only know about 4. But anyway, so now it's coming out in September. They're putting it on DVD.
Oh, it's great.
So we'll see.
Well, it's good that this is happening now because, I mean, with someone like Wells, all of this is happening after the fact where you have to like kind of piece together the intentions of someone who's no longer there to say them. Is there, are you still involved with The Other Side of the Wind? That?
Oh God, yes. I think that'll haunt me to my grave. Yes, we've been on the verge of completing that film for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I can't say we're much closer at the moment. Right now there's an impasse.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is the staging in your films, the blocking. It's so complex, and it seems like that's something that's disappearing from a lot of films that exist now, that kind of in the camera editing, so to speak.
Cutting in the camera.
Yeah, even just like blocking, like there's the movements of characters, especially when they're having disputes in your films, is just so captivating and real at the same time, but it seems like that's being streamlined to the point where it just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, you know, I've come to the conclusion that when you do a scene without a cut, it happened.
Yeah.
There it is. He shot it. We recorded it. It's there. It's a documentary of that moment.
Yeah.
It maybe lasts 3 minutes, but it really, what happened? They walked down the street, they did that, they actually did that, they ran back, and so on, you know. So there's a reality to it because there's no interference from the editor or from the director. And I once asked Orson Welles, I said, what do you think is the difference between doing a scene in one shot or cutting it into many pieces? And Orson said, well, we used to say that was what separated the men from the boys.
The performances in the thing called Love are also very authentic. And
very good. River was great, and Samantha Mathis and Sandy Bullock everybody was good. I had a funny situation with River because I came in one day and we had a scene. It was a long 3 or 4 page scene, and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this scene in one shot. That's it. So once we get it, we're done with it. He said, wait a minute, you're not going to cover it? No. You're not going to get close-ups or over shoulders? No. So once we just do it, that's it? That's it? That's the scene? I said, yeah. Oh, great! And he loved it. And then every day from then on, he said, let's do it in one. Let's do it in one. And he wanted to do everything in one. I said, well, we can't do this in one, River. Got to cut. Oh, let's do it in one. And he was so good. What a great actor he was. What a beautiful guy. I miss him.
Was there some influence there, I mean, from Cassavetes, who it seems like in that period, maybe the end of that period, that it seems like that relationship you can feel it in some of those films, maybe Texasville specifically.
He read the script of Texasville. I remember when he reread the script for me and he called me up, he said, what a life.
And you were hesitant to do it. Was that something that...
Well, I had to do it because it became financially rewarding to do it. But I was nervous about it. John and I became good friends, starting with a time that, you know, everybody was shocked after the Last Picture Show. A lot of people in Hollywood were shocked that I did a movie like What's Up, Doc, which is diametrically opposite. But I had already done Last Picture Show, so why not do something different? And they said to me, would you make a picture with Barbra Streisand? I said, okay. Well, what do you want to make? I said, well, I don't want to make that script. I'll do a different kind of script, like a screwball comedy. Okay. So I make the picture, and there's a screening in New York. there was a lot of sort of ritzy people there, and some snobby people and some names. And John was there with Jenna Rollins, and the picture starts, and they're not laughing. They're not getting it. About 10 or 12 minutes into the picture, John says out loud, "I can't believe he's doing this!" Everybody laughed, and from then on, the picture played great. So we became friends after that.
Was it difficult with something like Noises Off, where you're adapting a play? It almost struck me whenever I see it as being kind of like Rope in a way, because there's these elaborate camera movements, but it's also a very contained story.
Yeah. Well, Noises Off was a big challenge. I saw it on Broadway, and I thought it was very funny. And I said I'd like to make a movie. And Johnny Carson's company was going to do it, and they almost bought the rights, and they didn't get the rights. Spielberg got them. Then a couple of years passed, and Frank Marshall, who'd started with me, was working with Spielberg, and I called him. I said, "Is Steven going to make Noises Off?" "No, he's not going to make Noises Off, but he's going to produce it." "Well, I'd like to direct it." And so I came in, I had a meeting with Frank, and then I had a meeting with Steven, and everybody said, "Okay, why don't you do it?" And what I said was something that, because they said, how would you do it? I said, "You got to just do the play. But it all takes place in the theater." I said, "So what? Rear Window takes place in an apartment. Lifeboat takes place in a lifeboat." And then I remembered something Hitchcock had told me that was very critical. I said to Hitch one time, "How come you didn't open up Dial M for Murder? You pretty much stayed in the apartment." He says, "When you have a hit play, don't open it up. Don't try to make it cinematic. Just shoot it." Of course, he meant just shoot it the way I would, meaning Hitchcock.
Yeah.
I thought, well, the way to do Noises Off is to basically just do the play, but shoot it well. And we opened it up a bit in the intermissions, and the beginning and the end, and in the intermissions, we opened it up enough. Because Hitch made the point that when you have a hit play, it's the construction that makes it a hit. So if you change the construction, you're changing the very thing you bought. So I convinced them to let me just do the play, and opened it up a little bit. And we had great actors, and we did a lot of the things without a cut, many, many scenes without a cut. To the point where when I see it now, I screened it for some students, I kept saying, "Where did we cut?" Because I'd forgotten, Jesus, how do we keep this going? Of course, the other trick was, did you ever see the play?
No.
Well, the play ends with the characters pulling the curtain down.
Okay.
And that's the end. And then they come out for their curtain calls. Well, part of the dynamic of the play, when you're sitting there, is, will the actors survive the evening? Running up and down the stairs, doors opening, closing, falling down the stairs. And you say, God, are they going to live to the end of this play? Well, that goes when you do a movie, because obviously they made the movie. So I thought, well, how can we get some of that feeling into the movie? And the way to do it was, I said, with the actors. Because if I tell them, we're going to do this 15 pages without a cut, and if anybody screws up, we got to go back to the beginning. Well, you got 9 actors not being the one, everybody not wanting to be the one who screws up. So you got a certain tension. And that worked very well for the play. But we would do 30 takes sometimes if we didn't get it.
Mm-hmm. Just after this period, you start working a lot more on TV. What is the experience like for you? How does it shift from doing a film that's is going to be released theatrically?
I didn't have any difference.
Yeah.
The only difference is that you have to work faster.
Yeah.
But I just dealt with it like it's a movie. It just happens to be a movie that's going to be seen on television, but it'll be seen on DVD or VHS, or it'll be seen. It's not going to be read, so it's still a movie. I guess the only difference is long shots I wouldn't make quite as long, and I'd compromise a little bit on the distance, a little bit.
Yeah.
And speed, you had to go fast. I did a movie up here in Quebec City and Toronto called rescuers,
Oh.
stories of courage. Shot it in 19 days. It was fun.
Yeah.
I like going fast. I get a certain energy to it. So I had 19 days, 25 days, 24 days, nothing more than 24 days on these films. And they were, I had good scripts and very good casts, and I'm proud of them. I wish they were more available. And I did one with Sidney Poitier.
I'm fascinated with that one. I want to...
That was fun too.
Because you shot partially in London, but just seemingly for that opening bit. And the pre-credit sequence seems to move so like blisteringly fast, and it's almost like there's that like bang cut straight into the
modern
title.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. I thought it was, the original movie was a little dated.
Yeah.
So I didn't take much inspiration from that. Sidney was the producer, the co-writer, the star, and it was a sequel to a hit picture of his. So I had, you can imagine that maybe I didn't have a lot of power, but he did everything I asked him to do. And we even rewrote it a bit when I asked him to. And I only gave him one direction through the entire 24 days, which was a little faster, Sidney. A little faster. That's the only thing I ever said to him. And he never once said to me, is that all the fuck you can say is do it faster? He never said that. Didn't think he would have said it. But he never did. He just did it faster, and it was always better. I tend to say faster. That's one of the things I do quite often. It's always better faster, generally speaking. When we did Cat's Meow, Joanna Lumley was interviewed and says, how did he direct you? Pedro? Well, Pedro would just generally say, darling, a little faster. When we were doing What's Up Doc, we had a scene on the roof where she sings and they fall off the piano and so on. And there's a long scene on the floor. It was 4.5 pages, very exposition-y scene. And we ran it, and I said, would you time this? They timed it. It was 3 minutes, three plus, a little bit more than 3 minutes. I said, it's way too long. And they said, Peter, it's 4.5 pages. Way too long. So I said, take his glasses on the line. Don't do it after the line. Do this. I combined a lot of business so that it wasn't waiting for business and so on. I pick up the cues. You come in a little sooner here. Come in. Let's do it again. We ran. Time it. 2 minutes. And that's pretty good, but it could be faster. So then I gave him some more direction, and we shot it, and it was 1.5 minutes. That's it. Now, you know, interestingly enough, Frank Capra said something to me once, years ago. I said, I noticed you pace your pictures very quickly. Even his dramas are paced quickly. He said, it's a funny thing. I don't know why, but film seems to slow things down. So if you shoot something if you play it at normal speed, it'll seem slow. If you play it at a little bit faster than normal, it'll seem normal. So if you want to go fast, you really have to speed it up. So I always push for a little bit quicker.
Well, even when the films are moving so quickly, it seems like especially later in your career, the stories tended to open up a little more, where they're not so contingent on very specific plot points, but more about the behavior of the characters. And I can't remember who compared it to Leo McCarey, about being more about the behavior.
Well, it is about the behavior, and I think the behavior, that's what silent movies were about.
Yeah.
Behavior, gestures, silent looks. That's the thing that movies have, that movies can do better than anything.
What is your relationship currently with younger filmmakers? I know someone like Noah Baumbach or Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson and Noah Baumbach are producing my next picture.
Is this the Rene Clair Ghost?
No, it's called Squirrels to the Nuts.
Okay.
It's a comedy, I hope. We're casting it now. We're going to do it, knock wood, in September. And then I have a ghost picture that Quentin Tarantino says he's going to produce. It's not Rene Clair, but it's a ghost picture.
Were you influenced by, what was that?
The Ghost Goes West.
Yeah.
Well, I loved that movie when I was a kid. I saw it maybe 10 times. I don't think it holds up too well now, but it's
fun.
It's fun, isn't it? Yeah. Robert Donat is wonderful. I loved him. It's not like that. It's not anything like that.
Okay.
It's a very contemporary story about a filmmaker, kind of a Woody Allen character. I mean, Woody Allen in the sense that it's a director, producer, actor who's famous for comedies. He's had 6 wives and 6 daughters, and his most recent wife died in a plane crash about 6 years before the movie starts, and he's gone to hell in those 6 years, to where he's unemployable in Hollywood, and he's ruined his relationships everywhere. He's chopped up a projection room at Universal, punched out a producer at Fox. Can't get, and it starts in, he's arriving in Rome, having bullshitted the Italians for 6 months, telling them he's got a great idea for a picture, but he has to find the locations first, so he's been scouting locations, he hasn't got any story at all. And they say, we're not like Hollywood, we're going to break your legs. So that's just the beginning, and it's a very complicated picture. It's the most complicated picture in terms of cast, because it's a huge cast, because you meet all the wives, you meet all the daughters, and there's ghosts, 6 ghosts. And I think there's 6 ghosts, and it was a number of ghosts. And it all plays in about 4 or 5 days, and it plays in 4 different countries, 4 or 5 different countries. It just moves constantly. It's constantly moving. I wanted to see if I could do a movie where it never stops. And there's a lot of characters, so it's a very ambitious picture. It's very personal. It's not about me specifically, but it's could have been.
Okay.
It's not about anybody I know, it's just a lot of experience I've had, and it was written for certain people in mind. I wrote it for John Cassavetes, and he read it and loved it and wanted to do it, but he was too ill, and I never did get the script right before he died. But he said to me, one of the last things he says, you better make that ghost picture, because I'll be there. So I'm hoping to make it so I can make sure he's there.
I really like that you mentioned how the excuse is location shooting, because so many of your films seem to convey a very strong sense of the place that they're being shot in.
Well, I think it's very, very important that the place where something is set is a character in the picture, and I don't mean having atmospheric shots of location with interesting faces that have nothing to do with the leading characters, which some directors do. They sort of do what Robert Graves calls kindling. They kindle the location. So you've got, Kazan does this, you'll see numerous shots of interesting faces, interesting locations, but then there's nothing to do with the characters. That's sort of like a pre-credit sequence. And then you get into the story and you don't know where you are. Mm-hmm. I don't want to mention other directors, but there's a number of directors have very little sense of the place. And I think it's an important thing. I think it's a character in the piece, the place. So, but I think it's important to have the actors, the characters, lead you into the place, not to have it separately told to you. Houston does that too.
Yeah.
He'll show you the place, but then once you get started with the characters, you don't know where you are anymore.
What is your experience like with the commentary tracks you record as a kind of continuation of maybe?
You mean the ones I do for my own films?
No, for other people's songs.
They pay me to do that. So I go in and I say, okay, run the picture, and they run the picture, they have the mics on, and I talk. Yeah. I never prepare, and I never hear it again afterwards.
Okay.
People say to me, gee, you did a great one on Citizen Kane. Really? I never heard it. I never listened to them. It's too boring to listen to. But hopefully it's not boring for the people.
Have you listened to like other people's commentary tracks?
No.
Is that something you've ever experienced? No. A lot of people share that opinion, though, that it takes away from why they're watching in the first place.
Well, I think it's crazy to watch it with the commentary track before you've seen the picture.
Oh, yeah.
I know a couple of people who do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they look at it that way first, but I don't want to do that. But it's okay if you want to see it once and then see it with the director. I take the image that I'm sitting in a living room with these people, with a bunch of people, and I'm talking about the picture, unbuttoned.
How have you felt about the blog that you've been?
Well, it's like having a damn column every week. It's write another blog.
It's not so
It's
much
okay.
Sweet Smell of Success, less glamorous.
It's less glamorous than Sweet Smell of Success, that's for sure. Isn't that a good movie? Great dialogue. What is this thing, integrity? A pocket full of dynamite. I love that movie. It was written by Clifford Odets.
Oh, yeah.
The script was, the final draft was written by Clifford Odets. Tony Curtis told me Clifford wrote the whole thing in the back of a truck in New York, in Times Square, sitting with an overcoat and an old typewriter. The reason I'm fond of Clifford is I knew him. First thing I ever directed was a play he wrote called The Big Knife.
Okay.
He's a great writer. Nobody's ever heard of him now. He was the premier American writer in the 30s. But as Gore Vidal says, this is the United States of amnesia.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that is kind of what you set out to do, is to offer more attention to artists that hadn't received it through your interviews especially.
Yeah.
But now it seems like everything's readily available. Have you noticed much of a shift, or do you still think that there are people who deserve more attention than they get?
Oh, I think there are still people who deserve more attention than they get, yeah. I think the general level of film culture is very low in the United States. I think it's better here.
Oh, okay.
I've had a bunch of interviews today, and they were all very intelligent. Younger kids, younger people, I've been teaching for a year or so, and kids don't have any idea about older pictures.
Even though they're available.
Even though they're available, yeah. They don't want to see black and white, they don't want to see old pictures, they're stupid. It's just ignorant. I was talking to a girl one time, and she had an accent, and I mentioned some picture, and she said, "Oh yes, that's with Irene Dunn and Cary Grant." I said, "How do you know that?" She said, "Well, I'm European." You know, Renoir said a great thing once to me. He said, "When you gather around you people to make a picture, you should not gather around you associates or collaborators, but rather conspirators." There should be always an element of conspiracy to making a picture. It shouldn't be legal.
Yeah.
There should be something slightly illegal about it.
Have you noticed a difference in how your films are received abroad versus in America?
Well, I think they take you more seriously in Europe. You know, I remember when St. Jack opened. We showed it at the Venice Film Festival, and it was a big success. We won the Critics' Prize, which hadn't been given at all for 7 years, not since Clockwork Orange. A picture I hated, but anyway. Suddenly there were articles in France, Bogdanovich, the misunderstood. They went back and looked at all my pictures and said, "We didn't understand this guy." Now we understand him.
I'm wondering if it's the marketing, because I feel like with so many of the films you can always point to at least one thing that seems baffling now, that would be the method it was chosen to be marketed.
I have suffered badly with bad distribution, yeah.
And even with a thing called Love, it just not being...
They just completely
they literally didn't distribute it, right?
No, they didn't. They tried it out in the South and it didn't do much, so they said the hell with it. It's weird, we had a screening at the Montreal Film Festival,
yeah.
And I went there and everybody loved the picture. They thought it was going to be a big hit. And it was well received in Vienna too. We went to the Vienna Film Festival. But then when River died, I think just the impetus went out of it. That happens.
What shifted in the director's cut for that?
Very little. I added 5 minutes back, but it's all the way through, little things here and there, behavior mainly.
Yeah.
And some esoteric things that River would say. But it's only 5 minutes, but it's huge difference. As an example, one of the things I put back was, have you seen the director's cut?
Yeah.
Well, you remember when she comes to that hotel at the beginning, and she opens the door and the music plays YMCA. And then in the original version, she just closed the door and that was the end of the scene. But I added back the part where she unpacks and you see what she's got in her suitcase. And you see his Robert Graves books and things about women and poetry and so on. And you get to know her better. And just the very fact that you spend a minute alone with her, really alone with her, gives you a more interest in her as a character. Again, it's behavior. You see how she behaves with the money and how she doesn't. But just the very fact that you spend a minute alone with her makes her much more interesting, much more important character.
Sandra Bullock's especially in that, it really jumps off the screen.
Yeah, she got the job in Speed because of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the director of Speed saw the thing called Love and hired her off of that picture to do Speed.
So that's one definite positive reaction immediately.
That was a positive reaction, yeah. Well, have you had it?
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Okay, sure.
It was outstanding.